Today, I'm going to start by talking about how one initiates a network study. In general, this is the hardest step and perhaps the most difficult of the Sisyphean tasks. I'm going to keep my lecture rather generic so that both our four leads, Cindy, Jack, Zenis, and Tamir, can learn about what the next steps are, but more importantly, other early stage researchers in the community can get an idea on how they can start their own network study, since it follows the same steps. Let me start with a quick lesson plan for the next 30 or so minutes. We're going to talk about the Odyssey R tool stack and the requisite software that package developers, protocol developers, and data partners are going to need to execute studies across our network. I'll spend some time talking a little bit about GitHub as an international collaborative resource that we use to share our open science, which not only includes the analytic packages themselves, but each of the important resources inside of those packages, like our cohort descriptions and complete analysis plans. In that, I'll talk about GitHub repos and, most importantly, how one does pull requests so that individuals can collaborate across the entire globe. I will then talk a bit about drafting a protocol and give some further details on how to post it so it is available not only across the community, but across the whole world. We'll finally finish up by setting up a manuscript document. It's important to think about that manuscript very early and how this relates to the team's environment. You know, a small disclosure, this really is my first attempt at a virtual lecture using multiple windows, so you really need to wish me a lot of luck. Also, since I can't see anyone and I want to make this as didactic as possible, if you have questions, please don't wait to the end. Just speak up so that I can hear you. My speaker is on, and we can fill in those small details. So let's start with the Odyssey tool stack. Our Odyssey tool stack for running large network studies depends on a suite of open source software that we in the community have developed. Most of this software is part of the Health Analytics Data to Analysis Suite, or HADES suite, and it is R-based. And there are a number of tools that developers across the community use to interact with the suite of packages. And using these tools will make it as easy as possible for us to collaborate on not only these 4 studies, but all studies going forward. HADES itself has a website that we'll go to, and on that website, there are some wonderful instructions for installing both R tools, which includes a set of compilers, which are often needed for bleeding edge technology. Most of our development in R uses an integrated development environment called RStudio. And since several of these packages initially originated from Martijn Schumi and myself, and were old, and were originally Java programmers, a lot of the underlying analytics are still in Java, so you'll need a Java JDK installed. I'll come back to the rest of these notes in a minute. If you go to the Odyssey tool stack, the most important page to start with for setting up your environment is the setting up the R environment. I'm not going to go through all of these steps, but I am going to highlight some important aspects that will make your journey much more smooth. You'll need an installation of R. There are multiple versions of R out there, and depending on what platform you are, it will default to different versions. Make sure you're using version R4. Whether it's 4.0, 4.1, or 4.2 is going to depend more on the environment that you have and shouldn't be a real issue. If you're on a Windows environment, please just install the 64-bit version of R. If you happen to be running a machine that only uses 32-bit processing, please reach out to me and I can help you get some hardware that's like that was developed at least within the last 20 years. Sorry, that joke sure didn't work very well. So we could get some moans out there too. So some come off well, some don't. Most of the development environment that many of us in the community use is something called RStudio that I mentioned is an integrated development environment, and I'll be highlighting that. When you install Java, it's best to install a Java JDK, not a Java runtime environment, and make sure that you install just a 64-bit version of Java if you're unfortunately on a Windows-based system where the Windows-based system gets confused. In addition, some of our packages will need you to install the R build tools called R tools, and there are instructions for installing the R tools packages on here. You can install RStudio. Any version will work. Any version of RStudio will also allow you to open simultaneously multiple different versions of R. There are steps you can use to verify your installation to make sure that your JDK is hooked up with R and RStudio is all driving this, and you can follow these instructions. Many of our packages have not made it onto CRAN yet, and if you want to interact with GitHub, which I strongly recommend our developers do for sharing their work openly across the globe, it's a good idea to create a GitHub personal access token. There are instructions here in R on how you can do that using a package called use this. Or you can create your personal access token on the RStudio package itself. What's most important with this personal access token and other secrets that you might want to keep on your computer, like passwords that you want R to have access to, but you don't want to share with others, you can install this information in a .renv file that R will specifically look at. So we might want to give the information that, for example, someone's personal access token for GitHub happens to be this code. There is a simple function in the use that package that will allow you to open up this environment file and add all the information that you want. I'm not going to display mine because I keep a number of personal secrets in that file that I use for accessing different databases. But if you need help with this step, please contact me. So to remind you, there are a number of helpful packages and functions that often cause a little bit of confusion. Those are in the use this package, creating your token, adding information to your R environment, and installing packages directly. The next step in initiating a network study, and this is a step that I hope Cindy, Jack, Zenis, and Tamir will take probably while we're going through this lecture, is requesting a GitHub repository. So all network studies really should be hosted under the Odyssey Studies GitHub organization so that we can both index them, keep track of them, and there will be fewer questions on how do I get your source? Where's your protocol? I'd like to participate. Where's the README instructions? For all of their studies, they're hosted in one place. In addition to being publicly accessible, a real advantage of GitHub is all of our work is then version controlled. So this allows us to roll back mistakes, track changes, and be completely transparent in the studies that we develop and then execute. It's really easy to request a repository. All you need to do is just email one of the owners of this organization and ask for a new repo. So here's a screenshot of the current owners. They include Chan, Jenna, Kristen, Lee, myself, Patrick, and Martine. So I wrote myself an email. I said, hey, Mark, I'm going to start a new Odyssey network study. Could you please create a repo for me? And I gave a name that I'd like that repo to be called. And today I'm just going to call it SOS Test 1. But there are some important things to keep in mind in terms of the names that even Patrick Ryan forgets, and I go back through and correct. And that is Martine and I were former Java developers, And so everything is named in terms of upper camel case, often called Bactrian camel case, because Bactrian camels have two humps. So the first term is also capitalized. Even acronyms should be upper and lower cases. This helps us disambiguate words and index the work that's going on. I also said, hey, Mark, could you use the study repo template? Because this template has a protocol document that one can build off of. In addition, I provided my own GitHub login name. And the reason I did that is so that when the owner of this organization creates your repo, they can then make you a maintainer. So you also have control over what gets displayed and who's involved in this work. Again, my own spam filter filtered out this message. So, email the owners a couple of times if you don't get a good response back from them. I've already gone ahead and created for us the SOS test 1 repo based on this template, and that's what we're going to build our work off of. The next step that the package maintainer and other developers who would like to participate in the construction of the execution engine, the protocol, and the documents need to do is to make their own local copies of this repo so that people can work concurrently, and those concurrent changes can be easily merged together. There are a couple of ways of working concurrently with Git. One is to work in a branch, and the other is to work in something called a fork. Unless you're the actual maintainer themselves, I highly recommend working in a local fork. So a fork is a copy of a repo that will allow you, anyone participating in this work, to make your own changes without immediately impacting the original project. And the advantage here is that will allow you to kind of iterate back and forth on ideas and changes and test code before these changes are then proposed back to the upstream or the main repository, where the study maintainer can help make decisions on integrated or not. So the first steps that all developers will have to go through is to create and work in a fork. Once we've done that, we'll then talk about how to make pull requests to propose changes in sort of a dialogue between all of the developers and the maintainer themselves. So here's a screenshot of making a fork for people that aren't sort of watching the video live, but I'll do one at the moment. So here's the repo. I emailed myself and I created myself a blank repo based on a template. And so all you need to do is just pull down to create a new fork. So I'm going to create a new fork in my own organization, which I'm going to work where I'm going to work. And if there are multiple branches, you can copy the multiple branches. It doesn't really matter. Then you just hit create fork. And of course, this is all done live, so errors are going to happen, but we'll work through that. So this created a fork in Suchard with the same sort of repo name that we started with that looks exactly like the original repo. We'll come back to talk about how to communicate those changes back and forth. So I actually don't need to click on this final one because we've created that fork. So the next step is all of the information that we have currently exists up in the cloud. We'd like to bring it down and to be able to use this Git repository within RStudio and start our development. So we're going to fire up RStudio. We're going to clone our fork, which means makes a really local copy on my computer itself, and we're going to get to work. So let's see if this is going to work. So I've opened up RStudio. Please let me know if I need to make some windows larger or smaller. And I think I can just go to File, and we're going to start a new project because we're all ready to get moving. And I'm going to create it using version control, so everything is controlled and open. We're using Git, and of course, my repository is located at github.com, Suchard SOS test 1. Great. And I hit create project. And it says it's not found because I can't spell my own last name. Let me make sure yes, M. Suchard. Awesome. Great. Now we have an RStudio project, SOS test 1, with the files that come in the initial template that we'll look at in a minute. So let's talk a little bit about the initial tasks in terms of study development. For a GitHub owner who is paying attention to your request for making a new repo, they may have gone through a couple of housekeeping steps themselves, but I'm lazy, so I didn't do any of that initial housekeeping that we need to do once in the project. That will include, changing the project name from whatever the default template was to our project. But most importantly, it means updating the initial readme.markdown file. And this readme.markdown file we use across the community for indexing. And so it's very important to keep the key data in this markdown file up to date. It will include who to contact as the maintainer, where the protocol is, where the study currently is in terms of development, execution, manuscript writing, completion, and access to both the protocol and the manuscripts themselves. After we've completed this housekeeping, here's where the real fun starts in terms of the study development. We need to draft a protocol. I'm going to discuss drafting this protocol in Markdown, which will make it both beautiful to display, easy to read, and most importantly, the components in it will be reusable without any duplication. And reusability without duplication is very important. Previously, we were drafting protocols in Microsoft Word, and in that protocol, somebody had to transcribe over our complete definitions for all of our cohorts and the analysis changes. And then individuals would modify this Word document thinking that that would actually change their study. But that's a good example of code duplication, right? You have two copies of the same information, and you're only modifying one, not the copy that actually gets used in execution. So developing it in Markdown within the R package means things are specified in one place. And when they get changed, they're automatically implemented in all the further down steps. Additionally, the R Markdown format automatically outputs to HTML, which means that you can immediately web serve your protocol and your documents so that they're available for everyone in the community to access. They have the latest version. There's no more, oh, could you email me, version 1? Oh, I got the wrong version and I edited the wrong version. But it's a static URL that IRBs can then look at to see what you're doing. You could also render in a beautifully formatted PDF for sharing or submission to journals, or Microsoft Word for your Luddites who you want to make some small edits to. And then we'll begin the process of starting a manuscript document. So let's start with some of this housekeeping. First bit of housekeeping is my project is called SOS Test 1, but my project file has a different name, so let's just rename it. Hopefully the organizer will have done this for you. Is there a rename here? We can move. Yeah, let's try that. Nope. Which one of these is rename? Rename is the hidden one. Nice. SOS Test 1. Perfect. And now let's work on our Markdown document. So I suggest starting from the template Markdown, since this has everything that's going to be citable. All right, so I'm just going to copy this template Markdown. I'm going to go to my my README file. I'm going to say this is all nice, but what I really want it to say is this. And although Cindy doesn't know, she's already been indirectly communicating with me on a starting title. So we can put in things like the study title. We can talk about different status badges of where we are, the analytic use case. For right now, I'm just going to call it a population level estimation. Or maybe that's the study type. We'll look at some other examples to figure out what goes in each of these. Different tags that you'd want, sort of who the lead is, and a link to the lead's tag on the forums, and most importantly, things like start dates. End dates, and we'll go through and we'll add links to the protocol publications and where the results are and a description. It's important to keep this information as up to date as possible. So we have done the work that I should have done as the owner of the organization and providing you this. We've changed the name of our project and our README. And now it's time to start with the fun work. So the first step, of course, is to develop a fully specified clinical protocol. Even in observational research, I strongly believe that protocol-driven approaches really do deliver higher reproducibility, and because of that reproducibility, higher reliability in terms of the analytic results themselves. In putting together a protocol, I suggest modeling after, starting with a detailed example. And I've given a link to an overly detailed example of a reproducible protocol across the network study, across our network, but there are simpler ones as well. This is the protocol, for example, for the type 2 diabetes project that's going on right now, and up on this page is just a link to the worldwide accessible HTML version with a complete specification of maybe we'll get to them in the of each of the different exposure cohorts, but we'll return to that. I also encourage making sure that you develop this protocol in a version-controlled and publicly accessible way. Because, I personally would hate to hear from an IRB, for example, or from a data partner, I can't find your protocol, or someone emailed me a Microsoft Word document, but it was the wrong version, and so we can't participate, or a reviewer can't evaluate your work. Because there's a mismatch between what they've received and what you've put in your manuscript, or an alternative research group can't replicate your work because it's not been completely specified. And so there's an easy solution to making something version controlled and publicly accessible, and that is just make it part of your study package. We're going to put our protocol in along with our analytic code to avoid that type of code duplication. Within the template that I gave, that we have up on Odyssey Studies, there's an outline, for example, for a protocol in our markdown language. And so the first steps that all of the protocol developers will take will be so they can do this synchronously or asynchronously, develop different sections of this protocol. So let's walk through a couple of those initial steps, and then we'll demonstrate how to feed that information back up to GitHub so our collaborators can work along with us. So we have our markdown file. So within documents, within your template, there is an outline for a protocol document. And if everything is installed properly, you should be able to compile this. By default, it will just compile into an HTML document, but you can compile it into a Microsoft Word document if you'd like as well. And so here's just the brief outline of this document. We're going to provide things like the abbreviations we're going to use. We're certainly going to identify the responsible parties and all the investigators with our disclosures. We'll provide an abstract for easy skimming of the work, and I recommend a structured abstract. This is just the structured abstract that I tend to use, but in working over the last week with Cindy, she has a slightly different structure that she prefers, and so we'll go with that. There are, just headers for the background, the study objectives, the research methods used, broken up into a complete description of our design, our data sources, the study population, our exposure and outcome cohorts, the specific analysis that we're going to be doing, a justification of your data sources, a discussion of the strengths and limitations, a statement of the protection of human subjects if that is necessary in the project that you're doing, and if it's not necessary because you're using secondary data, why it is not necessary, and additional requirements like management of adverse events if that's a possibility, and plans for dissemination or communicating study results. So this is what your R Markdown document initially looks like. Most of your tables you can just provide as sort of R tables. Actually, for the investigators themselves and on your own manuscripts, I suggest keeping track of all of your authors in a data frame, because that allows you to quickly reformat for different journal specifications and keep track of the sometimes 50 or 100 authors that might participate in a large network study without having to manually type in that information. So Cindy has provided a number of abbreviations initially that I think we're going to be using, right? So I'm just going to put them in here, right? And turns out that, my tab my delimiter that I've used between the abbreviation and the word, I put in a comma, so maybe I'll just change that to comma, right? And so if we were to recompile, of course it breaks because I haven't tried any of this. Okay, we at least have a nicely formatted, and even in Microsoft Word it will be nicely formatted, and in PDF it'll be nicely formatted. We want to change the title here, don't we? Yeah, let's change the title. Probably want some carriage returns in there, but we'll see. Great. Perfect.
Mark, should we interrupt you because it's like 10 minutes left? You're gonna probably do
if you need to, you definitely should. I think I asked at the beginning, please interrupt. We're gonna go through pull requests. What, Christian? Do you have a question?
Keep going.
No, okay.
Pull request is good.
Yeah. I will get through this. And then the next steps are to populate the different bits. We'll populate the abstract. We'll populate the responsible parties, and we'll identify individuals to start working on different parts of the study. Now, all of the work that we've done here is just locally, and we want to share this across the community. So the way that we're going to do that is we need to commit our changes to our local copy. So I can go to Git, and now I have made changes. I changed this, so I want to stage it. It's a change I want to I want to share. This is a change I want to share. I want to share that I've deleted that file, and I want to commit the changes that I've made to the protocol themselves. I go to commit, and I can double check all of the changes that I've made here. And this is just some initial changes to protocol, and I can hit commit. Now I've committed the changes to my local computer. I can push this to my fork. Right? I can also ask my fork, has anything changed there? And nothing has changed there. So now we've made some changes to the protocol and we pushed it to our fork. Oh, there was one other aspect of the protocol I wanted to make sure. Using this markdown, it really is the write once, use many. And one of the ways to kind of write once, use many is we have great tools to automatically insert your completely human readable cohort definitions. And so I can show you this example. Well, here are some good examples. What this does is it just reads in the JSON specification that our phenotype group will help us develop for our exposure and our outcome cohorts. So there's no need to be transcribing back and forth. You go from Atlas directly to your documents, which renders nicely in HTML, in PDF, and in a Word document. And one of the nice things of write once, use many is I would strongly encourage you, once you have your protocol, to consider registering it with a clinical protocol registry like EUPass. And you can use the same code, write once, use many, for example, to formally publish your protocol. In Legend Type 2 Diabetes, we recently did that with minor modification to the markdown. Without any code duplication, we created a publication which has now been submitted and published in BMJ Open. So finally, we need to talk about how to communicate the development that you've done back with your study, with the study maintainer. And the way that that's done in the Git world is something called a pull request, or you'll often hear the infamous term, did you make me a PR? And the thing to keep in mind about a pull request is it's a two-way communication between the you as the developer and the study maintainer, where you can communicate what changes are going on, adjust for conflicts that may have arisen with having multiple people across the globe working simultaneously, before it all gets merged together. And the way that you develop a pull request is you'll initiate that on GitHub in your fork, and you'll provide an informative message to the study maintainer to start this communication. And since it is two-way, try to be responsive to constructive criticism that you get back in the changes that you've suggested, so that we as a community can develop the best product possible. So I can go to my local fork. Notice I committed some initial changes to the protocol. All right, and so now I can make a pull request back to the study maintainer, for example, Cindy. So if I just go to pull request, I can create a pull request. And notice my pull request is going from my local fork, the arrow, to Cindy's repository here. And so I'm going to create that pull request. It's going to be, hi, Cindy, here's a bit of the initial protocol. Please let me know what else I can work, for example. And you can see exactly the changes that you're proposing to the work. And then I just create the pull request. So the study maintainer, when they go to the main repository, will see that this pull request is there and that they can merge it. Since I'm an owner of the original repository, I could merge it in myself. And in this case, although it's not necessarily a good idea, I'm just gonna confirm that merge for a specific reason. We are creating a large amount of reproducible documents, and it is easy to display these reproducible documents on the web for access around the world. So we can easily self-host this material. And the way that one would do that is in my repository, I generated some HTML documents. I can copy those documents, say, into a directory that I like to call /docs, and then ask an owner of the main repository to enable GitHub pages. Once you do that, all of the HTML documents within this subdirectory are then accessible through direct HTML work. Now, for the owners and maintainers who aren't familiar with how to set this up, you just go to Pages, you deploy from your branch, and you select the directory with which you want to deploy. Now, I have not copied the HTML into this directory yet, but when I do, you all will be able to click here and it will bring up the protocol, just like I brought up the protocol earlier for the Legend type 2 diabetes. I also recommend adding some additional documents that are available to developers and executors. For example, an operations manual, which will include things like frequently asked questions, human readable ID tables, like what all of our how our cohort ID numbers actually point to human readable objects, how analysis IDs actually point to human readable objects, and some instructions for accessing the results once they get posted up to our database server. The final step that I'd like our 4 leads to consider this week is to start drafting your manuscript. Do it early, do it often, do manuscripts often. I'd recommend using R Markdown, but in the past, this hasn't worked so well because people are very familiar with writing manuscripts in sort of Word. So that we don't have the version control issue instead of Word, Google Doc has worked very well for Odyssey in the recent past. Google Docs do have some version controls. They're always accessible, so you won't hear the please email the latest version, or even worse, oops, I just made 2 days of extensive edits on the wrong version. Could you try to like self-merge these together? Within Google Docs, Paperpile is a pretty good bibliographic manager that also works with the bib manager for the protocol. And you can add a direct link to these documents to the top of your Teams channel, which is what I'll do after this call. I'll add a link to an example document. Here's an example document I just put together this morning, which has an initial author list, title page information, and each of these sections. Even now, we can start tagging individuals. Oops. Even now, we can start tagging individuals to start writing the background and the methods. I believe co-authorship should be more inclusive rather than exclusive. And as a community, we have some guidance on engaging as many people as possible. I have a couple more minutes for questions, so I think now is a good time to broach those. So let me see if I can bring everyone up. Are there some questions? Well, hearing no questions.
Adam asked one in the chat. So how does one get feedback on a protocol or study plan? Is it a forum post?
I think forum posts would be a great way to engage a larger bit of the community. If you'd like some feedback on specific changes that you're making to the protocol, I'd suggest in your pull request you can at individuals who you want to be notified that those changes are there. But otherwise, if you need to bring in more expertise or a greater field, then the forum's a great place to go.
So Miguel had his hand up. Miguel, do you have a question? I know we're close to the top of the hour.
Sorry, no questions. Okay. Sorry, great, thank you.
All right, well, at least from Cindy, Jack, Zenas, and Tamir, the owners of that organization should be expecting some emails. I'm on vacation, so hopefully some of the other owners, or I'll get to it when the plane flight's over.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark. This was really amazing, and you can see in the chat there's a lot of compliments and how useful this was. So a reminder, this will be recorded. We do have a couple questions. So again, tonight's what is tonight for me, which might be tomorrow morning for some of you, is the same topic, initiating a network study, that will be led by Chan and Jody Ann, and that will be the cadence for the next 9 weeks. Same format tutorial, different times, so that everybody can do it, focusing on different studies, but we are moving forward with all 4 studies. All will be recorded, all will be posted to the community calls page today, this session, but also the SOS challenge page. So please use that as often as possible. This is really an exciting event. I hope everybody's looking forward to it and participating however possible. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Jody Ann. Thank you, everybody who joined. Enjoy tonight's session. We will see you next week when we talk about data diagnostics. Thanks so much, and good luck to everybody participating in the SOS challenge. Take care.